everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is a video after a very long time, and I'm not going to offer any explanations as to where I've been and why I haven't been filming, because I just was not, and that's basically it. Life takes over. I wasn't reading much. There have been a couple of life changes in the sense that we moved house, which was 2 months ago. I still live in Canada. We just had to move to a different house. So that we had to settle for that, and usually like every time that I've moved back home, there's like a bunch of people helping me, and this time when I had to move house, it was just me and my husband, and we had to do it together. And if you can hear an obnoxious scratching sound, that's because we have also adopted a cat. If you follow me on Instagram, he's literally all over my Instagram, and that's what I keep posting about because I haven't been reading much. So my life has literally been just work and my cat and household stuff and just enjoying it. Like, I'm not complaining that it's been busy, this and that. Like, I've actually really taken the time to kind of settle into Canada. Like, it hasn't even been a year yet, and I just wasn't feeling on top of things. Recently, a couple of weeks ago, I seem to have gotten my reading brain back, and my cat is very hyperactive. He kind of brings this toy which used to be a bird. He brings it to me so I can basically play with him. So this is probably the most casual video that I've filmed, very unprepared. There's like a pile of laundry that needs to be folded. So recently I started reading a little bit more, but unfortunately the books that I have read are not good ones. I'm doing this kind of from memory and the reviews that I've been writing on Instagram, so I don't really have a lot of thoughts, and like I've just been enjoying reading and I haven't been critically reading. But I just wanted to share the few books that I've read. Unfortunately they weren't that great. But I want to start with a book called Lucky by Marissa Stapley. And basically Lucky is kind of like a thriller book. It's kind of like an action-packed book. It's about this woman called Lucky, and basically her and her dad are con artists, and she was kind of introduced into this life very young, and we follow her into different stages of her life as she's growing up and her as an adult. So basically Lucky is kind of like doing this scam of her life. Like, she's going to do that one big final thing which makes her very, very rich. So basically I really enjoyed myself reading this book. But was it a good book by any means? Like, I would say no. It was very entertaining. It was very engaging. It was almost like an action-packed Tom Cruise movie, which doesn't really, I mean, no offense to Tom Cruise fans, I've seen a lot of his movies, but like the kind of cheesy dialogue, action-packed, like everything kind of just stupid things happen, but you're supposed to go along with them because it's an action movie and none of it makes sense. And that's basically the vibe that this book gave me. Like, it wasn't anything that changed my life. It wasn't like a literary masterpiece, but the time that I read it, I had a really, really good time. So a lot of the times you have to kind of like suspend your disbelief or suspend your belief. I've forgotten what the term is, but basically you just have to go along with the story and see what happens. And yeah, there's like absolutely ridiculous twists and turns. There's like people who so blindly and stupidly trust this con artist, and they kind of give them everything, and it's just sort of like, okay, we get that you have to make your story make sense, but some of the things are downright unbelievable, and I still had a really, really good time. Now, the next book I read is called Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. This is the same person who wrote Convenience Store Woman, which I read last year. And I actually enjoyed Convenience Store Woman. It was basically about a woman. I think she's suffering from autism, and she works at a convenience store, and that's the life that she knows. And when someone recommended Earthlings to me, I was like, sure, it's going to be a bit strange, but it's going to be a good book. And it was just, I was not ready for it. Like, I went into this book so unprepared for the content. Don't fall for the plush toy on the book. It had so many things that disturbed me. There was like domestic violence, there's like sexual violence, there's like sexual assault, there's just different kind of things that happen, and I was so unprepared. But basically it follows a girl, and her name is, if I can remember it, Natsuki. So it's basically Natsuki's story as she's growing up, and she kind of feels like she's a bit different. She doesn't conform. She doesn't really fit into the very strict lifestyle and the role for women as it's defined. and her parents think she's useless, and everyone else kind of thinks she's useless, and she's not treated very well, and she's treated very harshly by her parents and her family members. And we basically see her in two different timelines. We see her as a kid and then again in her adult life. And I did think that the first part of the book was very interesting, when she's a teenager and she's going through all of these changes and kind of trying to understanding the world from her point of view. But then when she grows up, the story just takes a different turn. And again, this person might be on the spectrum of autism, which is never confirmed, but the story has similar themes to Convenience Store Woman. Just a very different way of executing it. And by the end, I was kind of disgusted by some of the things that were happening. Like, I think it became very strange. It became very eerie. I couldn't follow the logic. And there were some really gross things that happened in the end. And I could not, like, I forced myself to finish it because I was so deep into it and I just had to know what happens in the end. But it was a 2-star read for me. Like, I just really disliked it, unfortunately. The next book I read was called Best of Friends by Kamila Shamsi. Kamila Shamsi is a Pakistani author. And I thought I'll read a Pakistani book because I was kind of missing home. And now the question is, like, why did I go to read Kamila Shamsi to relate to a Pakistani environment? I don't know. And again, it's just one of those things that, oh, this is not for my kind of an audience. But before I get to that, so this book is basically about two girls. I think their names are Mariam and Zara. One of them is like from a very wealthy family. The other one's kind of like middle class or upper middle class, and not in the same social strata or social, like, they're not in the same class of people. Their families don't interact with each other outside of the two friends meeting. They don't move around in the same circles. And this friendship between these two girls was very interesting in the first part of the book, which was set in 1988 in Pakistan. And it was a different political regime, and it was interesting to see like how that affected the girls on a day-to-day basis. As they were young and they moved in different like environments, like one of them was more affected by the politics more than the other, and you would think that that would be the difference that kind of separates them as they grow up. So the first part of the book was very engaging, incredibly strong. I was very excited for it. But the second part of the book let me down so heavily, or so deeply. I've forgotten how to speak in English, but I was really let down by the second part of the book, which was set in 2019 in England. The two women have now grown up. They've remained lifelong friends, but the story is it just becomes incredibly bizarre. Now, I'm someone who really deeply believes in female friendships, and I feel like they're just as important as any romantic relationship in your life, or any like familial relationships, right? Like, my best friends are people, some of them I've known since I was 9, some of them I've known since I was like 15, some of them I met at work and they've become really good friends. And then there's not that many. There's maybe 4 people, but these are people I trust my life with. And I don't think issues like boyfriends or things like that would really like destroy a friendship, or they would come up. But as the years go by, the friendship in the book just becomes more, I don't know how to say it, is banal a word? Or it just becomes just so tedious to read about, because the two women like really resent each other. Like, there's this deep discomfort that they have towards each other. They don't move around in the same circles again. And these are women that are portrayed in the book as incredibly successful. Like one of them has made an app or something, and she's like hanging out with the Prime Minister of England, and the other one is like a lawyer, an immigration lawyer, I believe, or some kind of like a really important job, and she's like on TV all the time. So the two women have grown up to be incredibly successful, and you would think that that would not make them as petty, because as things happen you move on, and as fights happen you move on. And it was just not it. It was just so disappointing to read about, because it just felt very odd. Now, maybe I feel like Kamila Shamsi has come under the pressure of staying relevant, because there were parts of this book that were just there so that she could appear more woke. And this is my opinion, you can disregard it. And this might be mild spoilers, but one of the friends, as she grows up, we learn that she's from the LGBTQ plus community, which again, there's nothing wrong with, but there was no indication of that in the first part of the book. This is almost a surprise to the reader, that she is in a relationship with a woman, and it was just so random. No explanation offered, no feelings were kind of explored in the first part of the book, other than the fact that she was very much into her own world, and there was no basically indication that this is this character's journey. But I just feel if you're going to make one of your characters gay, you have to kind of like make it a journey rather than slap it in the second part of the book and just tell us that this has happened, because it just felt like it was forced inclusion. And again, I'm really not a fan of the way Pakistani authors write about sex and booze. Like, I really am not. I just think it's completely unnecessary. If it makes sense in the story, please add it, but sometimes it's just added because it kind of needs to be there. You need to kind of tell the readers that this woman has done this in her life and this was her youth, and it serves no purpose to the plot. That's my rant over for this book. And I've read like 4 Kamila Shamsi books at this point. I've read Home Fire, I've read Cartography, I've read Burnt Shadows, and this is the 4th one. I've never I haven't liked a single one of them, so I don't understand why I keep going. But anyhow, the last book I'm going to talk about is called What My Bones Know by Stephanie Fu. And this wasn't a bad book. This was actually a really good book. I think I gave it 4 stars, but it was also one of those books that I was not in the right headspace for, because this is basically a memoir, so it's non-fiction, and it's a memoir of Stephanie Fu learning to deal with her complex PTSD. And there's a bunch of trigger warnings that you should check out, because it deals with all kinds of abuse, mostly like physical abuse, especially the one she faced as she was a child from her parents. Mostly like she had a really bad relationship with her mother. And I like this book because it touches upon different elements. If you're wondering what I'm looking at, I'm just reading the review I wrote. But yeah, one of the reasons that I liked this book was because it touches upon like intergenerational trauma. It talks about like the model minority. It talks about the immigration experience of her parents. So there were different counts of this book that I liked. I just was not ready for it, because I feel like after a reading hiatus, this was the first book that I read. So I did enjoy this one. So out of the 4 books, this was probably the most well researched, and the one that's a memoir, and it has like that kind of content which some people might enjoy, but it's about complex PTSD, so beware. I had a good time reading Lucky. I also had a good time reading half of Best of Friends, and I had a miserable time reading Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. So those are the books that I wanted to talk about, which I've read. I'm currently reading Our Wives Under the Sea, which seems very, very eerie and strange to be reading at this time, especially in light of the Ocean Gate, the submarine that went down, unfortunately, because this is about a woman who has basically is a marine biologist. She was in a submarine and it lost contact, and it's incredibly interesting, and I'm really into it. So far I'm really liking it. And the other book that I've read maybe 15 pages of is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, and I've only read like one other book by R.F. Kuang. I think it was The Poppy War, which was her first fantasy book that she wrote, and I didn't continue on with the series because I really disliked it. But anyhow, I think I've been filming for about 20 minutes now. I'm gonna edit this, I'm gonna put it up before I get second thoughts. So if you've watched this, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.